In the late 8th century, the northern coasts of England and Scotland retained a near pristine calm. Monasteries, key spiritual and scholarly centers of Christianity, stood isolated between the sea and vast meadows, seemingly untouched by worldly threats. Lindisfarne, a small island off the coast of Northumbria, symbolized this serenity. Its monastery was renowned for exquisitely hand-copied manuscripts and valuable relics. The monks began their day with quiet prayers, sweeping the stone courtyards and carefully transcribing Latin texts, all unfolded in a solemn and orderly atmosphere. But on June 8, 793, that peace was shattered. The long, narrow, swift ships of the Vikings emerged from the North Sea, cutting through thick morning mist. The Vikings, seasoned warriors molded by storms and icy winds, targeted monasteries rich in treasure and poorly defended. Lindisfarne became the perfect target. As the raiders landed on the beach, they smashed doors, slaughtered monks, and set fire to the library. Gold, manuscripts, and sacred objects were reduced to ashes. The chanting of prayers was drowned in smoke and flame. Lindisfarne became a symbol of the terror that Christian communities had never known before. Anglo-Saxon chronicles recorded that the local people were so terrified that they did not dare leave their homes. Many monks believed it to be God's wrath, but the reality was that the attackers were human, armed with sharp weapons, organized and able to cross open seas. The Lindisfarne raid was more than a local event. It was a warning. The North Sea had become a pathway for invaders, and no place along the coasts of England, Scotland, or Ireland was safe. Following Lindisfarne, the Vikings turned their attention to Iona, a significant Celtic Christian center off the west coast of Scotland. At least 3 attacks occurred on the island between the late 8th and early 9th centuries. In 795, there is a record of a raid, and in 806, the chronicles note the death of 68 monks. Iona was an ideal target, wealthy, lightly defended, and spiritually symbolic. These raids destroyed not only treasures, but also knowledge and religious authority. Archaeological evidence confirms traces of fire and skeletal injuries caused by weapons, proving that Viking violence was real and not myth. The Vikings were not solely after plunder. They sought new lands to settle, establish permanent bases, and expand economic influence. The Hebrides and Orkney gradually became Norse-dominated regions. Continuous raids forced Scottish coastal communities to strengthen defenses, pushed Celtic communities into alliances, and compelled local rulers to strategize against an unpredictable foe. In Ireland, a similar pattern unfolded, starting slightly earlier in scale. Raids began in the late 790s, with small Viking groups attacking coastal monasteries, looting and capturing slaves. Initially, these were hit-and-run attacks, but by the early 830s, the Vikings began constructing long forts, fortified ship camps that also functioned as trade and military centers along major rivers such as the Liffey, Shannon, and Erne. Dublin became the most enduring center, followed by Wexford, Waterford, and Cork. At first, they were invaders, but over time, they integrated with Gaelic communities, participated in local politics, and became a significant part of society. This shift from raiding to settlement illustrates that the Viking strategy was not merely violent, but long-term. The long forts served as more than temporary bases. They became foundations for trade hubs, connecting Ireland to Northern Europe in the exchange of slaves, goods, and information. Simultaneously, these settlements influenced local politics as Viking warriors became a military force, sometimes collaborating, sometimes clashing with Gaelic clans.
Following the initial attacks on Lindisfarne and Iona, the Vikings did not stop. In the decades 810 to 830, they expanded their raids along the northern coasts of Scotland and the western coast of Ireland. These raids retained the original pattern: swift, precise, and extremely brutal. Monasteries were either targets or centers storing food, materials, and treasures. Monasteries such as Skellig Michael off the coast of Kerry in Ireland became easy targets due to their isolation and wealth. The Vikings used longships, long, narrow, lightweight, but durable vessels capable of moving quickly on both open sea and rivers. This allowed them to strike unexpectedly and retreat before local forces could mobilize. This created a constant climate of terror along the Celtic coasts. Monasteries had to remain vigilant, local rulers strengthened defenses, and communities learned to watch for signals, warn each other, and evacuate when signs of attack appeared. Ireland was the first area where the Vikings established permanent settlements. Initially coastal raiders, they gradually built Langfort, ship camps that also functioned as military and trade centers. Locations along the Liffey, Shannon, and Erne rivers became the foundation for later towns such as Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, and Cork. These centers not only protected their ships, but allowed them to expand trade, exchanging slaves, goods, and information with other northern European communities. Meanwhile, Scotland experienced larger-scale attacks. In 839, a notable battle between Vikings and the Picts, combined with some Gaelic forces, resulted in the death of King Uwin of the Picts and several chieftains. The outcome was a weakening of Pictish power, paving the way for the later formation of the Kingdom of Scotland, Alba. These events demonstrate that Viking raids were not mere acts of violence, but strategic power disruptions, leading to long-term political, social, and economic changes. The Vikings did not only destroy, they adapted and integrated. In Ireland, some warriors became mercenaries, others married into Gaelic families, gradually forming Norse-Gael communities. In Scotland, islands such as Orkney and the Hebrides became Norse settlements, leading to a Celtic-Norse hybrid society that lasted centuries. This integration had lasting effects on language, law, and commerce in both regions. These raids also had profound religious and cultural consequences. Monasteries were burned, knowledge was lost, but the fear of Viking attacks prompted Christian communities to fortify defenses, build alliances, and improve governance. Events such as Lindisfarne and Iona served as enduring reminders of maritime threats, influencing defense strategies, trade, and political relations for centuries. All these developments demonstrate that the Vikings were not only ruthless raiders, but also a historical force that shaped the long-term development of Ireland and Scotland in economic, political, and cultural terms.
By the 830s, 850s, Ireland had become the center of long-term Viking activity. The initial small raiding groups evolved into large Longfoot, ship camps that also functioned as military and trading centers along major river mouths. Dublin, located on the Liffey River, became the most important hub, where the Vikings constructed fortifications, storage facilities, and trade ports. Waterford, Wexford, and Cork soon developed similar centers. Here, Viking warriors not only raided, but also engaged in trade, slave markets, and exchanges of goods and information with other northern European communities. These Longfort allowed the Vikings to control waterways while exerting significant pressure on Gaelic chieftains. Initially, local communities faced continuous attacks. Monasteries were burned, riverside villages were raided, and many peasants were enslaved. Over time, some chieftains recognized that the Vikings could also be allies. Certain Viking warriors became mercenaries, supporting chieftains in internal conflicts. These alliances ushered in a period of integration, combining Norse and Gaelic cultures and forming Norse-Gael communities. This integration process affected not only politics, but also social structures. Vikings settled permanently, building houses, enduring settlements, and participating in both agricultural and maritime trade. Meanwhile, the Gaelic population adapted to Viking military strategies, constructing walls and river fortifications to protect people and property. As a result, Ireland became a land of blended cultures,
with visible Northern European influence in architecture, law, language, and commerce. Meanwhile, in Scotland, raids continued along the western islands and coasts. Orkney, Shetland, and the Hebrides became Norse-dominated regions, featuring permanent settlements where Vikings lived, traded, and formed communities. This domination lasted for centuries, creating Celtic-Norse hybrid societies with combined laws, language, and customs. Major battles, such as the one in 839, continued to impact Pictish and Gaelic power, driving shifts in political authority across Scotland. All these developments demonstrate that the Vikings were not merely ruthless raiders. They were community builders, trade network creators, and influential actors who reshaped the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of Ireland and Scotland for centuries to come.
In the first half of the 9th century, Viking raids in Scotland and Ireland were no longer isolated acts. They became a series of systematic conflicts, profoundly affecting the political structure of local kingdoms. In Scotland, raids targeted not only monasteries but also Pictish and Gaelic coastal settlements. In 839, a notable battle between Vikings and the Picts, alongside some Gaelic forces, resulted in the death of King Ewan of the Picts. This battle was a turning point. Pictish power was significantly weakened, paving the way for the formation of the Kingdom of Scotland, Alba, in subsequent centuries. These battles not only altered political power, but also drove social changes. Gaelic and Pictish chieftains had to consolidate forces, form alliances, and improve defenses. The Vikings did not just attack, they began to seize land, establish permanent encampments, and participate in local politics. In Ireland, Longford, such as Dublin and Waterford, became new centers of authority. Some Viking warriors became advisors or mercenaries for Gaelic chieftains, and some married into local families, forming Norse-Gael hybrid communities. On Scotland's western islands, such as Orkney and the Hebrides, the long-term Viking presence led to the development of Celtic-Norse hybrid societies. They maintained their own legal structures while interacting with the native Celtic population. These settlements lasted for centuries, leaving lasting marks on culture, language, and commerce. The Vikings built wooden houses, granaries, ports, and fortifications, creating sustainable settlement centers that later became crucial hubs of Norse-Celtic society. The Norse-Gael integration was not only political, but also fostered a vibrant economic and trade era. Centers such as Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, and Cork became international trade ports, connecting Ireland with Northern Europe, England, and coastal France. The Vikings engaged in slave trade, exchanged grain, furs, metal goods, and other commodities, significantly transforming Ireland's trade networks. Moreover, Viking raids reshaped religion and knowledge. Many monasteries were destroyed and manuscripts lost, but this destruction prompted Christian communities to strengthen defenses, form alliances, and improve governance. These upheavals, although devastating, drove local societies to adapt, grow, and emerge stronger over the long term.
By the end of the 9th century, Viking raids in Scotland and Ireland gradually shifted from short-term plundering to long-term settlement and lasting political influence. Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, and Cork grew from long forts into urban centers where Vikings served both as merchants and military leaders. Norse-Gael hybrid communities emerged, blending customs, laws, and cultures from both civilizations. In Scotland, the islands of Orkney, Shetland, and the Hebrides became Norse-dominated regions. Vikings built enduring settlements, ports, homes, and fortifications, creating lasting population centers. Pictish power weakened following major battles, and the Kingdom of Scotland, Alba,
emerged based on alliances between Gaels and Picts, influenced by Viking culture, military practices, and economy. Viking raids not only transformed politics, but also ushered in a vibrant era of trade. Settlements became gateways connecting Ireland and Scotland with Northern Europe, England, and European coastal ports. Goods such as grain, furs, slaves, and metal items were exchanged, promoting long-term economic development. Meanwhile, the initial devastation forced local communities to strengthen defenses, build walls, and form political alliances, enhancing their resilience and adaptability in the face of drastic changes. The Viking legacy endured for centuries. Cities like Dublin, Cork, Waterford, and Wexford remain today with clear marks in urban layout, ports, and trade networks. In Scotland, Orkney and the Hebrides still bear traces of Norse heritage, from place names and traditional housing structures to culture and customs. The story of the Viking raids demonstrates human adaptability. From brutal attacks, northern warriors not only plundered, but also integrated, built communities, and shaped the long-term social and cultural landscape of the Celtic Norse regions. Through these events, it becomes evident that Viking raids were a significant part of European history, initiating an era of commerce, settlement, and cultural transformation in Ireland and Scotland, and leaving lessons about human resilience, strategy, and adaptability in a dynamic historical context.